4 years later, Mrs. Kessler muttered loud enough for the front rows to hear, and she still reads slower than my nephew in elementary school. A few teachers laughed under their breath. I kept my eyes locked on the folded graduation program in my lap while the auditorium lights burned across the stage. Rows of families filled the room. Phones were already recording, not for the valedictorian, not for the athletes, for me. Because everyone knew my name for one reason. The dumbest student in school, a boy 2 seats over, leaned toward his friend. Watch her trip walking up there. Another snickered. Nah, she'll probably forget her own name. Mrs. Kessler adjusted the stack of diplomas beside her and smirked toward the other teachers. This should be interesting. My stomach tightened. Principal Reynolds stood at the podium reading names alphabetically while applause echoed through the auditorium. Honor cords, scholarships, standing ovations. Every student before me had some achievement attached to their name. Top student, captain, future lawyer, future doctor. Then there was me. The girl teachers sighed it when I took too long reading aloud. The girl classmates called loading screen because it supposedly took my brain forever to work. The girl nobody expected anything from. I slid my fingers under the edge of the sketchbook hidden beneath my graduation gown. The corners were worn from years of carrying it everywhere. Inside were pages nobody at school had ever seen, design sketches, machine concepts, repair diagrams. The only place where I didn't feel stupid. Lena Morales, Principal Reynolds, suddenly said, stopping halfway through the next sentence. The room quieted strangely. He stared down at the card in his hand longer than normal. Mrs. Kessler leaned back in her chair with a crooked smile. Go on, she whispered. Let's get this over with. But Principal Reynolds didn't continue. Instead, he looked toward the auditorium entrance. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Then the doors opened. A woman in a dark blazer stepped inside, carrying a silver document case sealed with a blue stamp. She walked straight down the center aisle, while every head in the room turned toward her. The principal slowly lowered the microphone. The woman stopped beside the stage and pointed directly at me. I'm here because of her. Nobody moved. Then she turned toward the teachers seated behind the podium. Her eyes locked on Mrs. Kessler. She is. 3 weeks earlier, I sat across from Mr. Bennett in his cramped guidance office while rain hit the windows behind him. He kept flipping through my file without looking at me. Well, he said carefully, there are still some trade programs accepting late applications. I stared at him. I asked about engineering schools. Yes, but those are competitive. You said that already. He cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. Lena, sometimes realistic options are better than disappointing ones. The words landed harder than I expected. On the wall behind him hung acceptance photos from former students, scholarships, universities, smiling faces holding letters they'd worked for. None of them looked like me. I swallowed. Can I ask something honestly? Mr. Bennett hesitated. Okay, why was I never tested? His expression changed instantly. For what? For anything. I leaned forward. Every teacher said I struggled. Every report card mentioned reading problems, but nobody ever helped me fix it. He closed the folder too quickly. Those evaluations are complicated. That's not an answer. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed on the desk. A photo from my uncle's repair shop appeared on the screen, an engine I'd rebuilt the night before. Mr. Bennett noticed. You still working there? After school? Every day? You like machines that much? I shrugged. They make sense. People don't. For the first time, he almost smiled. My uncle always said the same thing whenever I repaired something faster than his employees. You understand systems better than most grown men, he'd tell me. Too bad your school can't see it. Mr. Bennett opened my folder again. then froze. A loose envelope had slipped halfway out from the papers. Before he could grab it, I caught part of the text stamped across the top. Cognitive discrepancy evaluation, immediate intervention recommended. I looked up sharply. What is that? He snatched the paper back. You shouldn't be reading confidential documents. My chest tightened. That's about me, isn't it? Lena, what intervention? But he was already shoving the envelope into a drawer. Some records are incomplete, he muttered. Don't focus on things that won't help you now. That night, I went digging through old boxes in our garage while my mom worked late. Yearbooks, elementary school papers, old science fair ribbons. Then I found a dusty medal tangled in newspaper at the bottom of a storage bin. National Youth Engineering Challenge, finalist. I barely remembered entering it in middle school. Taped to the back was a faded white business card. Heart Educational Foundation. I turned it over slowly. There was handwriting on the back. Please contact us regarding Lena Morales immediately. My pulse quickened. Why would a national foundation know my name before my own school ever did? Graduation rehearsal turned into a public joke before it even started. Students crowded the auditorium aisles while teachers shouted seating assignments across the rows. Everyone was loud, relaxed, excited, until I mispronounced one Latin phrase printed in the ceremony script. A few students laughed immediately. Mrs. Kessler didn't miss the chance. Careful, she said loudly from the stage. We don't want Lena accidentally announcing herself as valedictorian. The front rows burst into laughter. Someone behind me whispered, "Record this." I heard a phone camera click on. Heat rushed into my face, but Mrs. Kessler kept going. No, she said with fake patience, waving me toward the back rows. Let's put you somewhere safer, like I was a problem to manage. I moved silently while students smirked at each other. One guy actually clapped slowly as I passed. Principal Reynolds stood near the podium pretending to review papers, saying nothing. Not one teacher stopped it. When rehearsal continued, counselors began reading students' future plans for the graduation program. Full scholarship to Stanford, joining the Air Force, accepted into Johns Hopkins. Applause followed every name. Then they reached mine. A pause. Mr. Bennett glanced awkwardly at his clipboard. Lena Morales, nothing else. A girl near the aisle frowned. Wait, that's it? Another student laughed. Did she even pass? More snickering. I stood up and walked straight out of the auditorium before anyone could see my face. Lena, wait. Mr. Bennett called from behind me in the hallway. I spun around. What was in that envelope? He looked toward the auditorium doors nervously. You need to calm down. No. My voice cracked. You all treated me like I was stupid for years. I want one honest answer. He rubbed his forehead hard before speaking quietly. There were recommendations made a long time ago. What recommendations? For evaluations. Academic support. He hesitated. And advanced aptitude testing, I blinked. Advanced? You showed unusual spatial reasoning scores when you were younger. My heart started pounding. Then why didn't anything happen? Mr. Bennett opened his mouth, but another voice cut through the hallway. Because some students mistake encouragement for entitlement. Mrs. Kessler approached us calmly, heels clicking against the tile floor. Mr. Bennett immediately stepped back. I stared at her. You stopped it? She folded her arms. Lena, your problem has always been denial. You struggle academically. Accepting that would have saved everyone a lot of time. That's not what he just said. Mrs. Kessler's eyes hardened. Do you know how many students want excuses for poor performance? She asked coldly. You were never exceptional. You were difficult. I looked toward Mr. Bennett. He wouldn't even look back at me. That hurt worse than anything she said. Mrs. Kessler turned to leave, then lowered her voice near him. If those records surface, she whispered sharply, we all have a problem. She walked away before either of us spoke. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't neglect. Someone had made sure I stayed exactly where I was. The morning of graduation, I almost didn't go. My gown hung over the kitchen chair while I sat staring at it with my phone face down beside me. 3 missed calls from classmates. 2 texts from my uncle. You earned this. Show up. I laughed bitterly at the screen. Earned what? 4 years of humiliation? My mom entered the kitchen still wearing her hospital scrubs from the night shift. She looked exhausted, but the second she saw me sitting there, she knew. You're thinking about skipping. I don't want one more day of them laughing at me. She stayed quiet for a moment, then slowly sat across from me. There's something I should have told you years ago. I looked up. Her hands tightened around a coffee mug. I fought the school when you were younger. What? They kept saying you didn't qualify for evaluations. I appealed it twice. Her voice shook slightly. Then they started sending letters saying your teachers saw no indication you needed support. My stomach dropped. You never told me that. I thought if we kept pushing, she stopped herself. Lawyers cost money, Lena. We didn't have it. I stared at the table. So every time I thought nobody noticed something was wrong, my mom had been fighting alone behind the scenes. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice spoke immediately. Please attend graduation before making any decisions. Who is this? You deserve answers. The call disconnected. I stood there, frozen. At school, the atmosphere felt different the second I walked backstage. Teachers were whispering in corners. Office staff hurried through the halls carrying file boxes. Even students noticed something was off. Why are district people here? Someone asked near the curtain. I looked toward the side entrance and saw 2 men in formal jackets speaking quietly with Principal Reynolds. Mrs. Kessler stood nearby, tense and unusually pale. That alone unsettled me more than anything. She noticed me watching and immediately looked away. A few minutes later, I passed the principal's office and heard raised voices through the cracked door. You should have informed her earlier, a man said sharply through speakerphone audio. Principal Reynolds lowered his voice. She doesn't know yet. That is no longer acceptable. We cannot stop this now. My pulse quickened. Stop what? Before I could hear more, Mr. Bennett stepped into the hallway behind me. Lena. I turned. He looked awful. Red eyes, shaking hands. Without speaking, he handed me a folded photocopy. What is this? You deserve to see it before today ends. I unfolded the paper. Evaluation summary. Exceptional engineering cognition. Advanced spatial reasoning percentile. Immediate academic intervention strongly recommended. My eyes moved lower. Recommendation status denied. Authorized by Elaine Kessler. The hallway suddenly felt too small to breathe in. She knew, I whispered. Mr. Bennett looked down. I should have said something years ago. You all knew. His silence answered for him. Before I could react, music from the auditorium began playing. Graduation had started. Minutes later, I stood in line behind the curtain with the paper trembling in my hands while names echoed through the speakers outside. Then mine approached. Mrs. Kessler sat beside the diploma table, waiting, watching, smirking again. Principal Reynolds lifted the next card. Lena Morales. He stopped. The auditorium fell silent. Then, without warning, he stood up and grabbed the microphone. Every head turned toward him, and the auditorium doors swung open. The woman walked down the center aisle slowly, the silver document case held firmly at her side. Nobody in the auditorium spoke. Parents looked at each other in confusion. Students lowered their phones. Even the teachers behind the stage sat frozen as she approached the podium. Principal Reynolds stepped away from the microphone without saying a word. The woman stopped beside him and faced the audience. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Hart," she said clearly. "I'm the director of the Hart Educational Foundation." A murmur spread through the crowd. Then she turned toward me. "We've been trying to reach this student for 8 years. Mrs. Kessler straightened instantly. "Excuse me." Dr. Hart cut her off. In middle school, Lena Morales submitted an engineering redesign proposal to a national student competition. She opened the document case carefully. Her structural solution solved a load distribution problem that several university teams failed to answer correctly. The room went silent again. I couldn't move. Dr. Hart continued calmly. Our foundation flagged her as an exceptionally high potential student requiring academic support and advanced placement opportunities. She removed several documents and handed copies to district officials seated near the stage. We contacted this school district repeatedly. Principal Reynolds lowered his head, and every recommendation was either ignored or formally denied. All eyes shifted toward the teachers section. Mrs. Kessler stood abruptly. "That is completely misleading." Dr. Hart looked directly at her. "Is it?" She pulled another paper from the folder. "Here is the original cognitive evaluation recommendation identifying severe dyslexia alongside advanced spatial reasoning scores, placing Lena among the highest performing students evaluated that year." Gasps spread through the auditorium. Mrs. Kessler's composure cracked for the first time. She struggled constantly in class. She snapped. "You can't expect." "No," Dr. Hart interrupted firmly. "You failed to recognize the difference between a learning disability and intelligence." The words hit the room like a shockwave. I looked around slowly. Students who used to laugh at me stared wide-eyed. Teachers avoided eye contact completely. Then Dr. Hart lifted something else from the case. My sketchbook pages, digitally printed. I blinked in confusion. We also tracked anonymous mechanical submissions uploaded through regional maker competitions over the past 3 years, she explained. Every design traced back to the same mind. She looked at me and smiled slightly. "Yours." My throat tightened. "That repair shop hydraulic redesign?" She continued. "A professional engineering firm is now adapting it for commercial use." The entire auditorium erupted into stunned whispers. "No," one student muttered behind me. "That's impossible." Dr. Hart opened the final folder. Inside were official scholarship documents, internship placements, and partnership contracts. "We are formally offering Lena Morales a full engineering scholarship through the Hart Foundation effective immediately." My knees nearly gave out. In the front rows, my mother covered her mouth and started crying. Mr. Bennett sat down hard in his chair backstage, visibly shaken. Then Principal Reynolds stepped back to the microphone. "For years," he said quietly, "this district failed a student who deserved far better." Nobody moved. He swallowed hard before continuing. "An external investigation into academic misconduct and suppression of student accommodations has already begun." Mrs. Kessler immediately turned toward the exit. 2 district officials intercepted her before she reached the aisle. "Ma'am," one said firmly, "we need you to remain present." The auditorium exploded into whispers again. Parents glared toward the faculty section. Students who used to mock me quickly lowered their phones and deleted recordings. And suddenly, for the first time in my entire life, nobody was laughing at me anymore. Dr. Hart walked across the stage and handed me the scholarship folder personally. "You were never the dumbest student," she said softly. "You were the most overlooked." The audience slowly rose to their feet, one row at a time, until the entire auditorium stood applauding. I looked toward Mrs. Kessler. She sat frozen in her chair, pale and speechless, while the same room that once laughed at me now refused to look at her. Principal Reynolds handed me the microphone. I stared at it for a second before speaking. "My whole life," I said shakily, "I thought something was wrong with me, because the people in charge kept saying it was." The room stayed completely silent. Then I looked directly toward the teachers' section. "Turns out," I said, "they just never bothered to understand me." No one laughed. Months later, Mrs. Kessler resigned while the district investigation continued. The school implemented mandatory accommodation reviews and independent evaluation oversight. Mr. Bennett publicly admitted he stayed silent because he was afraid of losing his job. And me? I left for engineering school under the Hart Foundation program with patents pending on 2 of my mechanical designs. The girl everyone called the dumbest student walked out of graduation with a future none of them saw coming. And for the first time in my life, my name was finally said with respect.